Welcome back to the second stage of painting a treescape with me. So just as a recap, remember last time we underpainted our canvas. We sketched out using pastel pencil or using chalk. We used a grid, it was helpful, and just got the big shapes and the bare bones of the composition onto the canvas. So I'm going to start painting. It's the exciting bit. But we're going to start perhaps somewhere that might be a bit surprising. As I started with the sketch, the trees, I'm going to start there to get painting as well. So I guess logically, it might feel that you should paint the background in first and then bring in some of these elements the closer they are to you. And I understand that, that's completely fine. However, I want these trees to go straight onto the black. I don't want any sky behind. I can't see it, so why would I paint it? And if I did paint white or pale sky underneath those trees, the colour, the paint that I then put on top would look very different over the sky to what it looks over the black. So I want there to be a consistency of the base colour that's underneath those trees. As we did with the sketch, I also want to use those trees as sort of way markers that are going to help me find my way around the foliage and all the other elements. The other advantage of putting the trees in first and the branches is that later on, when I start to paint around them, I can refine them. So if I make that tree too fat, I can narrow it down later. But I love starting with the trees. They are the network, they are the bones of the painting, so it makes all the sense in the world for me to start with those first. Okay, next thought, what colours are we going to use for the trees? So the first colour that comes to mind is that trees are brown. Well, of course, trees are more than brown, and some of them don't even look brown. Just a word of warning as well, be careful when you work from a photograph, because a photograph has already gone through a process. So the colours may not be those colours that you saw on the day. So just keep that in mind. And I think the biggest thing to think about when you're working from a photograph is that if those colours have changed a little bit through the process of the photograph, then there's no point trying to capture them exactly. What's more important is that they work here and that you like them and that you enjoy working with them. So if you want to, you can paint the trees purple. But I'm not going to do them purple, not today, but I am going to keep them dark. In the photograph, they are really inky and they create a lot of drama in the composition, and I am going to retain that. But I'm going to work with two colours and a white. Where possible, use at least two colours for any area. It'll make it look a lot more interesting than just one colour and a white. It'll look very, very boring. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use a blue and a brown. And the blue and the brown will mix to give me some duller browns and some more steely blues, as well as they will find a sweet point where they actually neutralize each other out, and what you get there is more like a black or a grey. So using both those colours is going to give me a whole range of blues, browns and greys. So the colours I'm going to use transparent red oxide, which is a golden paint. I like the fluid paint because I like to paint quite thinly. I don't like too much texture on my canvas. And the other colour I'm using is also a golden, which is anthraquinine blue. Another fluid. Now, alternatives to these colours would be ultramarine and burnt sienna, perhaps, or you could use a burnt umber and other blues. You could use a phthalo blue red shade as well. And the other pigment I'm going to use is titanium white, and this is a Liquitex. So it's still a soft body, but not quite as fluid. You can see how fluid these are as I pour them out. It's what I like, but you don't have to use the same brand. Some alternative good brands would be Amsterdam, which is a great brand if you're just starting out with acrylics. Ara, it's another fabulous brand. They do really, really good pigments. Their cadmiums are great. The brush I'm going to use is a long-handled, flat or bright. So I like Silver Silk. I think they're a great brush, but there are some other alternatives that you can use that are going to give you the same sort of mark making. What makes a good brush for me is that it's got quite a lot of tension, stiffness on the brush, but it's still smooth. So it's a synthetic, it's not a hairy, blocky brush like a hog brush, but it's very smooth, but quite stiff. That really helps me to push the paint into the canvas. Any sort of softer brush, like a natural hair brush that you might use for watercolours, isn't really going to push the acrylic in. It's going to be too soft and floppy, and you're going to find yourself wanting to use water with it. Don't use water with acrylic. It is no longer acrylic then. So this sort of brush, and I would say that the size of the brush is about 14 millimeters. I'm using quite a large canvas, so if you're using smaller canvas, then you might want to invest in a slightly smaller brush. But this is my go-to brush. So I've got my brown and my blue and my white. I've got my trusty paintbrush. And so now it's time to start. This is the scary bit. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to put paint to canvas. The trees are a really nice place to start, particularly in this composition, because they're quite simple. There's not a lot of detail to them. So really it's just a case of slapping that paint on and just be nice and confident and loose with it. So I'm going to start off by picking up a little bit of the blue. I'm going to start with this tree here. Just going to paint a few marks of the blue onto the canvas. Now then I'm going to add a little bit of the brown whilst it's still wet. Now these trees are quite dark, but I'm going to put a little bit of white through them because we want a touch of shaping and movement and a variety of tonal value in there. And also, as I put the white in, you guys can see what's happening because it's quite hard to see when you're painting dark colours on a black canvas. Doesn't make a demonstration particularly easy, but this is how I like to do it. Now notice I'm going back to my palette frequently, picking up the brown, picking up the blue. So I'm getting lots of lovely, almost accidental mixes. But because I'm not using too much paint at a time, I can keep adjusting. If I don't like the look of that, I can add another little bit of other colour. I can change my mark. And if I put too much of one colour in there, like the white, for example, I can blend it away and maybe put another colour on the top to adjust it a little bit. I'm holding my brush as far down, well really ideally there, but therefore it makes you nice and loose. If you can hold your brush at a distance, it'll give you lots of lovely loose marks. It'll also help you to keep stepping back from the canvas. So you're not being too on top of it, because if you're too on top of the canvas, you're going to start to want to get detail and drawing. So let's just keep going. So a little bit of brown, occasionally referring back to my inspiration. So there's a little bit of, oh, look at that lovely blue. Tiny weeny bit of brown in there, and it just, oh, gives you these fabulous colours. Let's just put a bit down there. Now I'm in quite a warm room, so my paint is drying very, very quickly. So I am just trying to work a small area at a time, and that way the paint will stay wet and I can keep blending into it and keep mixing into it. A little bit of blue, tiny weeny bit of light, Going back to the brown, making sure I'm holding the brush towards the end, stepping back. I'm going to add a little bit more white, there we go, on this branch, just so you can see what's happening, because of course this branch is still quite dark. But I want you to be able to see the sort of marks I'm making. Little flourish here. What I'm trying to avoid is drawing the branch in one sort of fluid line. So I've put a little bit of paint down and then I've gone into it with some shorter marks to make it look a little bit more bony. Just going to go back down here. Now, having had another look at the photograph, down here, I've noticed that there's a really lovely light area here. So this is actually already dry. So I can go back over it with some light blue. That's a bit light. I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown and just maybe create some lighter shapes over there. Notice I'm angling the brush in lots of different directions. Sometimes the marks are short, sometimes they're long. And I'm going to just use my white again. The white is really going to help me create some texture and some shape in there. So just flicking the brush around. Maybe let's bring a little bit of that light up there as well. So I'm going over what I've already painted. It's actually quite dry. So I'm just trying to keep it fairly similar to the colours that are already there, just slightly lighter, just making it slightly lighter. But I'm getting more confident with the colours that I'm using. So I'm going to start to pick both colours up at the same time. So I think, well, I know I want a bit of blue, I know I want a bit of brown. And I'm going to use both of those as we come down here. Now here there is some lovely light. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue and brown down there. And then I'm going to take my white again, not too much. Each time I pick up colour on my brush, I'm picking up very, very little. I don't want my brush to get too inky and too thick with paint, because then it's going to give me some unpleasant surprises when I increase my pressure. So look at that. So just to repeat that process again. I've picked up a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, popped it on the edge of the tree there, and then taking a tiny weeny bit of white and then just brush the white through. See how the white is mixing with those colours? Let's repeat, a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, just feathering it in to those wet edges. And let's just get a little bit more white and get some lovely shapes in there. Just feathering in the blue around the edges. Maybe a little bit of brown. Every now and then as well, I might find that there's colours on the brush, particularly the white in this instance, and I don't want that on there anymore. So you can give it a clean in your water. What I tend to do is I tend to wipe it on myself. You could use tissue, could use a paper towel rather than ruin all your clothes. But I don't find it necessary to wash my brush too much. The risk of that is that I have to keep drying it out and I'm going to lose the rhythm and things are going to dry. So I just wipe it clean on a bit of kitchen paper or an apron. What you may also notice, particularly if you're new to acrylics, is that your colours may dry slightly darker. And if you're working on black, they're almost guaranteed to dry a little bit darker. So you may think, oh, I made that area really, really light. And if we go back here, I thought that was way too light. And already it's just sunk into the black a little bit. And there's been a slight colour shift as it dries. Don't panic. and don't try and overcompensate. Don't try and go too light too quick. I think this is a great thing that the acrylics do, that they will dry a little bit darker. And of course, I'm a big fan of painting on the black, so I like the way that they sink into the black a bit, because it just makes you work harder. It makes you work harder to get to the lightest colours. And if you have to layer lots of paint before you get to your lightest areas, then those lightest areas are going to look really convincing. They're going to look like they've got a big story of depth behind them. So if we wanted to make that area lighter again, just another layer on top. Now, can you see that that is going into dried paint again? So it's got a very, very hard edge. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the brown and a little bit of the blue again, and just feather the edges of that hard edge. If I then go back over and repeat the process, little bit, those hard edges, and I'm just softening them off with my darker colours, my blue and my brown. And then that will help to take away any weird sort of edges like that. Might look a bit weird. So whilst that's still wet, we can just blend in the edges of that white. Knowing that that's wet paint now, we can push that colour in and then soften those edges again. So you've got to work at acrylics. No, you don't. You've got to play with acrylics. Acrylics are fun. And you can really experiment with what you're doing and the marks that you're making. So it's not really what I wanted to do in the painting, but having done it, as I step back, I think, oh, okay, that might work. And that is a good point, because it might work or it might not. If there's any question mark over something, leave it. Even if actually thinking, no, I'm not sure I like that, even that not sure, leave it. Because how can you judge whether that's going to work when you haven't tackled even a couple of inches around that area? You don't have enough information to decide whether that's wrong or right. So keep things like that in there, and then you can decide later if that's something that you want to change. Okay, so I'm going to complete all the rest of the trees. I'm going to need a little bit more blue. And I'll see you in a minute. I'm playing with lots and lots of different directions of my brush. So maybe some up and down, maybe some that sort of go around the tree, or maybe some that just go in any direction that I feel that I want to do. Now, obviously, I've painted several trees before, many trees before, so I have a real confidence about what I'm doing. But feel the same. Know that you can't go wrong. And remember, as long as these trees look vertical and are dark, that's all we need to achieve with this bit. So don't try and get too complicated with it, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Use this time almost as limbering up. So you're feeling your brush, you're working out how little paint that you need to cover. You're feeling the paint in the brush as well as you paint. Is it feeling like it's slippery, so it's nice and wet? Or is there a little bit of resistance in there, so the paint's drying slightly? So really use these trees as an opportunity to just have some fun, experiment, and you'll find different brush marks to me as well. We'll all find different ways of working because we all have completely different handwriting, for example. So there will be a way that you hold your brush. There will be a particular way that you like to move the paintbrush. There'll be different pressures that you use. There'll be different speeds that you're working with. And all of those things, as well as what colour you've picked up, will go into creating something unique to you. And that's what's wonderful about painting. We want to paint you on there. This is you. This isn't a copy of me. This isn't a copy of the friend that you're painting with. This isn't a copy of the photograph. This is you. And that's far more important than anything else. So be kind to yourself, be confident, and just have some fun. Just feel the paint as you're working. And if you think it, feel it, just do it. Because when it's in here, you can't decide whether it's a good decision or not. When it's on there, you can decide. And remember, if you're not sure, leave it. Okay, so I'm going to put in some of those little spindly branches. I'm going to put them in a little bit paler so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm actually, because these are going to be smaller marks, on my palette, I am picking up a little bit of the brown, a little bit of the blue, and a little bit of the white. And just taking time to dress my brush. So thinking about making sure that my paint isn't filling the brush, it's not a big thick brush, but that the paint is all on the end. So just taking a little bit of time on my palette to sort of almost mix it through. And then I'm going to twiddle this brush a little bit like I did with the pastel pencil and let it almost fall down the canvas to try and keep away from too long a brush mark, from something too fluid. So if we go to these lovely branches here, so notice I'm going to barely hold my brush and just let that fall down. I'm going to do the next one. The next one sort of comes out and then that sort of splits. Remember, branches split and split and split. What's this one doing here? Do you know what? I'm not sure that is a branch sketch mark, but I quite like the idea of that. Oh, look at them now. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to my brush and just stroke it along some of the bits of the branches. Oh, I got a really wobbly hand, so I don't want to go along the whole line. It just sort of helps the branch like it's moving in and out. They're a lot lighter than they are on the photograph. So you might want to keep yours a little bit darker. But again, remember, you're painting your rules. So we've got another one down here. Now what you might find is, particularly if you have a bit too much paint on your brush, or maybe if your brush isn't as smooth as mine, or maybe you put a little bit too much pressure on, you might find that your branches end up being a little bit thick. But don't worry, because we're going to be working either side of those branches. So we can use the foliage colours to paint over any thick areas or any mistakes that we make. So if you painted a branch in that you don't really like anymore, don't worry about it. We can paint it out later. I'm enjoying this too much. I'm going to end up with far too many. Put a little bit of light through that. Not too much light because that area is going to be lighter. Let's not overdo it. So when you're finished, do put your paintbrush in the water, because if you leave your paintbrush out with acrylic on, then the acrylic will dry and the brush will harden and you won't be able to use it. So as always, step back, have a look at what you've created and tell yourself you're flipping brilliant. So this is the first painting stage, and we've got some really great structure in there. So remember, use a couple of colours. So we use blue and we use brown and a little bit of white. Don't hold your brush too tight, and see if you can hold your brush far away from the business end so you can get nice and loose and loopy. Keep stepping back. Use any mark that you like. Think about how you're layering your colour wet in wet as much as possible. Keep going back to the palette. Keep blending the colour. Maybe blend the colour a few times, then move on. Don't spend too long in one area. Keep moving. You'll keep it more fresh and more exciting. If you want to go back on a second layer like I did with a couple of them, remember you're painting on dried paint, so it's like starting all over again. So just experiment. Remember, this is acrylic. You're only using a little bit of paint at a time. Try things out and see what happens. And if you've got any questions, then let me know. So good luck with the trees, and I'll see you again for the next stage, which is going to be foliage. Ta-ta.